This is the final word. It's the Australia-India Daily, the Border-Gadaska Daily. There we go. Jeff Lemon, Adam Collins at the Woolen Jabbar. The show's brought to you by Maurice Blackburn, Australia's #1 plaintiff law firm.
Hell yeah.
If you're the #2 plaintiff law firm, we're sure you're doing good work, but you're not #1. That's
not
how
looking
rankings
after our
work.
people.
That's how rankings
you might
work.
be looking
you
after
might
our
be
people.
looking after our people, and that's fine. We applaud you, but still, #1 is the place where you want to be, the place where Steve Smith was for a long time, at the top of the batting rankings. Not at the moment, but we'll come to all that in a moment, because you, Adam Collins, have 30 seconds to tell me about an entire day's Test cricket.
Bumrah started well, fiery first spell, nicks off McSweeney and Khawaja as well. Labuschagne follows a tempter from Reddy at 3 for 75, pressure on Australia, back end of the first session. Enter Travis Head, strums back-to-back hundreds against India, loves playing against India, 152, nearly at a run of ball, has Smith for company. Smith does it tough early on, fights out of the rut, gets to his 33rd Test 100, a 241 run stand for the 4th wicket. 3 wickets fall to the second new ball, but they reach the close at 7 for 405. Alex Carey, 45 not out, and makes sure that it is Australia's day. Big
More than Australia's day. Painfully not India's day. Yeah, you're wearing the Glenn Maxwell sunglasses
More about them
there, which you can get, and many people have been getting. Rough day for India, and I'm not going to do a dance and say I told everybody so, but I did. It just felt like something like this.
Did you? 3 wickets in the first session. Yesterday?
I said there'll be a partnership at some point, and it'll hurt them, and it did, because that tends to be.
So don't bag Nasser Hussain, but bag Rohit Sharma.
Well, just
laden with contradiction. They started really well this morning. Bumrah gave themselves an opening. The problem India have got nothing to do with the decision they made at the toss. They've got a one-end problem. It's the old Graham Gooch. World 11 at one end facing Richard Hadley. Ilford seconds at the other end facing everyone else New Zealand was putting on the field at that juncture. That's how I think today played out. Siraj did not look right at any point.
No.
Went off the field twice with an injury, once in the first session, once in the middle session. Reddy, I know he gets Labuschagne with that little tempter, but way too short. And Akashdeep, I think we want Akashdeep to succeed. There's a lot of goodwill towards him. He does move the ball around, but ultimately his figures when he goes to bed tonight are number 78.
Yes, and there were points where he looked dangerous, and it wasn't just swing. He gets seam, he gets the ball to jag in. He's got that threat there, but it just, they weren't able to break through. And, maybe on another day they could have broken through. Like Steve Smith, I was thinking about Steve Smith a lot today, wrote about him today, because I was thinking about that, the 100 he made here in the Ashes Test of 2017, and how it was a really tough 100. And he did it tougher almost, because we were used to Smith of that era kind of breezing along against a lot of opponents. And that one was a real grind of a century. But it was a grind of a century where it never looked like he would actually get out. It just looked like he had to work really hard to get the runs that he did. Today it looked like he was going to get out all the time through the first 30 that he made took almost 3 hours. It was hard work.
It was.
He really had to grind. And there were so many points where it could have gone against him. He shifted up his technique from the last couple of tests. He was doing the coming across the crease thing. He was coming around the front pad a lot. There were balls coming in. The one from Siraj, that full Yorker that swings in at his pads, and he just gets an inside edge on it. My word, that was close.
Looked plumb live, didn't it?
It would have been.
Tiniest of edges, but it was enough.
And there were ones going down leg side past his hip that he was almost gloving through, as he's done a bunch of times. He's then playing a missing outside off stump a lot. He gets the one that he kicks away off his off stump that Kettleborough gives not out, and it's umpire's call on impact. It could have maybe just been clipping the top of the bail.
Yeah, I mean, it was touching the stump.
If the umpire's call, if the margin for error means the margin for error could have meant it was missing. So that's how the margin for error works. The picture you see on the screen doesn't mean it was going to clip. It means it could have clipped. Right. So that one was close. I mean, there were so many bits, and then the one just after lunch when he plays the big drive inside edge over middle stump, and Rishabh Pant can't get across to it. It swings down the leg side and goes away for 4. Like, there were so many near things, and then he gets to 31, smokes that straight drive down the ground, hasn't hit a boundary that wasn't off the edge to that point, and just it was one of those shots where the crowd goes quiet for like a third of a second. Everyone goes and then they go hooray, right? But there's just that little in-draw of breath because it was so beautifully perfect, and from there he was pretty much good.
Yeah, there were a number of moments today where the Australian public, you could feel it in the ground. They're like, yeah, come on, that's the thing we know you can do. There was a couple of cover drives, in fact, more than a couple, a series of cover drives between 50 and 100, which are like, oh, that's him. That's that same cricketer who we thought might have passed us by. And he may have privately thought that as well. He'll never share that information. I don't expect him to, until he maybe writes a memoir or something like that about how tough the last few weeks have been to start this series.
It'll just be all about his gloves. It'll be like which pair of gloves was dry, how many he had out in the sun to dry, whether he was on pair 17 or pair 18.
Yeah, like his first book. But no, those drives and the on drive that took him to 99, I think it was.
99, yeah.
I was on comms at the time. I'm with Barat, and Barat's like pumping his fist next to me. You know, you can imagine how invested Baz was in the fortunes of Steve Smith today. You know what? If it doesn't happen again, you know, there's a number of ways this can go, and you don't want to sort of make predictions. If this is the last time Smith has a day like this, that's okay. I've been doing a bad job of explaining my opinion on this on radio at different points in the last few weeks. If it turns out that Smith can't climb the mountain one more time, and we're seeing the last flickers of an extraordinary career, that's great.
Yep.
You know, isn't it wonderful that he's been able to step up and make his 10th 100 against India, which is equal to Joe Root for the most ever, albeit in 41 innings, which is about 10 fewer than Root. His 33rd Test 100 goes beyond Steve Waugh, which he was tied with for 24 Test innings, his longest drought. He's within touching distance of the 10,000 Test run barrier now. He's about 200 or so, maybe 190 odd away from that. So I've never felt as invested in the idea that Smith must get the perfect farewell lap. It's more for his sake, having put so much work in, as you say, changing the technique week in, week out, trying to find anything that'll bring him back to a point where he can play the types of shots we saw today and earning a smidgen of luck along the way, which you need almost always to make 100. There are very, very few chanceless tons, and there are very, very few perfect tons, and this wasn't necessarily that, but there were moments through it that I deeply admired, and I feel like it was an innings of like true substance at a time that Australia really required it. 2 for 38 when he walked out to bat today, with Bumrah on one. On other points in this series, certainly at Perth, you can see a world where that's 4 for 38 or something like that. But he just bloody mindedness. So credit to Steve Smith. Well played, you.
Yeah, well, because he's not the player that he once was, you know, it's much more difficult for him to put these kind of innings together. You know, the degree of difficulty is higher, and there'll be back pages tomorrow saying he's back, and he's not back, and that's okay. I mean, I was looking at basically the high that he had was so unbelievable. I was doing these numbers for the piece. At one point, he makes 2600s in 99 innings. Right, so basically 100 every second test for a period of 50-odd test matches.
And better than that when you consider some of them would have been won by an innings.
Exactly.
You know,
so it is an absolutely unbelievable height that, of course, he's not going to get back to, because, you know, and there might be a few players who do something like that for 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, and he did it for 4.5 really, and then kind of 6 years after the ban, if you include the Ashes series of 19 when he comes back. But what he's done since then is be like a normal Test cricketer. He's got 75 innings, 7 Test centuries, right? And that's more like a normal player might be. And so he's basically been a normal player. And today he had to produce. They needed him at that stage. You know, they're in some strife at 3 down, and he was able to do it. He was able to settle things with Labuschagne, who did bat for a long time, even though he got out for 12 and people will say, you know, low score again. At least he did bat for a period of time that was necessary. And then Travis Head comes in, and it's a rare day that you make 150 at a runner ball and you don't get mentioned until like minute 9 of the podcast.
You're not
basically.
The story. Yeah, that's the expectations.
Yeah, it was just Travis Head repeating what he does.
And just to round out on Smith, I think what he's looking for, this might be a useful intro to a piece at some point. He was obsessed with Roger Federer, the tennis player, earlier in his career. And Federer did something that he wants to do at the very end of his career when he won a series of Grand Slams in 2017 and 2018, wasn't it, where Federer got on one and was able to start adding to that Grand Slam tally that most people thought had stopped probably 3 years before that.
Right.
He wants to do that, and today's a great thing, a part of that story if he goes on to do it. But, I'm not, to kind of repeat myself from before, I feel like if he gets to the end of this summer and he's made 10,000 runs and he makes a contribution the whole way through, there still might be a case for him finishing up this summer. I don't think it's open and shut. I think it's in the margins what he should do next. But boy, I'm glad he had today. And if it goes on to be a defining performance in an Australian Test victory, so many of those Smith hundreds in that extraordinary period between, I know when it was, the 24th of August 2013 is when it started, and it ended at Old Trafford in the August of 2019. In that window, acknowledging that there was a whole year where he didn't play Test cricket, he was a different animal altogether. He was averaging what you probably had it today, 76, I think it was from memory, 100 every fourth innings, as you pointed out before. He's never going to get to that point again. That's inconceivable when you're 36 and when the game's looking a lot tougher than it did before. But there is something to be said for the ultimate problem solver in Smith refusing to acknowledge that it's over, refusing to give up, and finding a way on a day like today to make himself be counted. Again, it's just an innings that I think he'll look back on with enormous fondness.
Travis Head, just did the same thing that he always does, which is come out. I mean, he played as many false shots as Smith did early, but it doesn't matter. That's just always the way with Travis Head. There'll be the big cut shot that misses. There'll be the one off the bottom edge past the stumps. There'll be the one that's in the air somewhere that people go, ooh, about, and then he just goes on and makes 100 anyway. Jadeja bowled badly to him at times, kept bowling short to him. He was able to go back and smack it through the offside a number of times. He likes to take on spinners. Particularly, we've seen it with Ashwin as well early on. I think there's that idea that he was vulnerable to spin, so he likes to attack spin as quickly as possible and try to hit them like straight down the ground as well. They were trying the short ball stuff. He was getting top edges he was playing the little uppercut down to deep third. It was just another aggressive Travis Head innings, and it seems like almost all the times he makes 100, he makes 140 plus. He doesn't do little hundreds. He does 140s, 150s.
Yeah, and look, the way that he went after Jadeja, that's a good point you raised there, because they didn't have their shit together when Head got moving. It was reminiscent of last week in terms of the time that he played. So he was out here in the 87th over last week. It was in the 81st over. So not long into the second new ball. And he came in at roughly the same time. In this case, he was in the 34th over. I think it was the 40th over at Adelaide. Right. So it's the same period of play where he's doing maximum damage when the ball's getting older. But like the World Test Championship final, India then took so long to realise that it was worth having a dart at the short ball attack and putting back a fly slip and seeing what happens. Here, they were all over the place. They had the fly slip, they were out, over the wicket, ran the wicket. They couldn't stick to one plan. They had 7 different plans they were trying to do, all in the space of one over. And Head does that to teams. Head does things which most players can't do, but one of the things he does to captains is he makes them overthink it. Because from time to time you hit a ball in the air, but gosh, the way he smothered and slaughtered those balls that were outside the off stump today, often for one, because the deep point and deep backward point were always there, but he just hit the cover off it time and time again. He's in rare form. Again, he's been the Indian slayer. He's made now in the last 4 hits against India, or last 4 test matches, the 160 odd in the World Test Championship final, the 89 when all was lost at Perth, 140 man of the match at Adelaide, and 152 today as part of that 241 stand, which completely defined the day. And it looked like he was doing it from about 30. About 30, you're like, well, Head is having one of those days. And that sequence about counter-attacking hundreds, it didn't start in 2023. It started here in 2021, the 150 he made against England, which was the quickest 100 in Test cricket at the Gabba. That's the first of those kind of counter-attacking knocks where it can go either way when he walks out at 5, and when he departs the field, the game's moved dramatically.
But it's also the turning point in his career where he made an explicit decision to bat more aggressively, even in those situations, and go from a kind of 70 career strike rate to something else. One other observation with Travis Head is that he's an attacking player who doesn't mind scoring in singles, and this is something I've been tracking a bit with the way that he plays. So Rohit Sharma had the deep backward point out. There was criticism on commentary why he's starting with a deep backward point, which was very much like during the Ashes last year when Cummins would have a deep backward point for Duckett and Crawley, right? The idea was these guys like scoring fours, deny them that easy get out sort of four that they can get, make them frustrated, make them try something else on. And the thing with Travis Head is he's an attacking player who likes hitting boundaries, but he doesn't actually get frustrated when he doesn't. This is one thing I've really enjoyed watching about him, is that he will happily hit to that deep backward point and take one again and again and again. He'll pick up a boundary somewhere else when the ball is there for it, but he doesn't try to manufacture a boundary if he hasn't hit one in a few overs. You will see periods of 10 overs where he makes 30 off 35 balls in singles, but he doesn't try to hit a 4. And then there'll be periods when the ball's there for it, when he does play the aggressive shot and hit 4s. So most of those attacking boundary players always want that 4. He's someone who seems to have the balance of mentality that he's not actually fussed when the boundaries aren't coming. Yeah,
and interestingly, the comparison point there is actually the 50 over World Cup final last year, where there were significant slabs of that innings where Head wasn't attacking at all, because he got that balance right between absorbing pressure and applying pressure. I agree with you. He's made an art form of hitting a boundary, then milking 7 singles that follow. And very few dot balls. Great stats today about McSweeney's left 77 balls in his career so far. Travis Head has left collectively across his last 7 Test 100, 62 or something like that. I mean, bit Duckett-esque in terms of not wanting to let the ball go. But yeah, Head gets that balance right more often than not. That's such a feature of how he's turning himself into the most important player in the Australian team.
Bumrah, got to spend some time on him, because 2 things here. 1, my God, what a bowler, and we keep saying it. 2, poor bastard. he's just, sisters are doing it for themselves. Bumrah is doing it by himself. He's carrying this side. He comes out first thing in the morning, knocks over both the openers, gets India back into the game after being a bit unhappy with where they went to bed last night after the rain. The big partnership happens. He finally gets Smith when he comes back in, gets him nicking for 101. And we'll come back to this in the Hall of Fame, but Smith doesn't do small hundreds really. So gets him, and then he gets Travis Head and Mitchell Marsh in and over. He's got 5 for. And the only other wicket has come from Nitesh Reddy bowling, let's be honest, a not very good delivery that was wide outside off stump that Labuschagne, gave him a bit of luck with. Yep. I mean, you can go credit to the bowler with the tempter, or you can go, he probably bowled a bad ball and got some reward from it, which can happen. Fine.
A little bit of movement off the seam, that's what he's trying to do with it. But it's ultimately batter error that Labuschagne, understandably, his eyes lit up and he tried to fly it through cover, and it went straight to Kohli at second slip, who gave it big, by the way.
So when Bumrah's taken 5 out of 6 and nobody else has done squat, I mean, you just feel for the guy. Like, how can he not be starting to feel run down and exhausted, and they're only halfway through the series?
It's like, how do you carefully sprinkle the gold dust that is Bumrah spells? It's an incredibly difficult balancing act for Rohit Sharma at the moment. Had 5 from 6 at one point, and that comparison to Hadley was a logical one, being at the Gabba what Hadley did here when he took his 9-wicket bag 40 years ago, 39 years ago. Of course, now we can't do that, but I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes with 8 with the way that he's bowling. The pitch did get quicker this morning, as it often does here on day 2 at the Gabba. A bit cliche, but it's true to say that it was zipping through more, and he absolutely made the most of that. Beautiful delivery to catch Khawaja on the crease, and then finding McSweeney's edge the over later. That is very difficult to repel. We've seen the way that he can be when he gets on top of Australia. And, again, I mentioned Kohli's response to taking that catch of Labuschagne at second slip, giving it big to the crowd, and it felt like, India were on the cusp of doing something special. And then Bumrah has to come off. Now, I know Reddy gets Labuschagne and Bumrah's already off by that point, but there's only so long you can bowl him for. And to the credit of India, when they were at Perth, it wasn't just him. Harshit Rana bowled splendidly. Mohammad Siraj has picked up most of Australia's top 7 in this series so far. He's got 10 wickets at 20-odd before today. Today's the first really bad day he's actually had with the ball in the series. So, he needs Siraj riding shotgun with him, and when he doesn't, that makes the tasks that much harder. He's still doing it with a smile on his face. Yeah. Is he doing it fully fit? I saw him hobbling a couple of times today. Siraj was favouring that right leg a couple of times as well. It does feel like now the tables have turned quite dramatically, and it's India who are under the pump now, and where it was Australia who were the side at Perth who felt like they were carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, so it'll be now for Rohit and co when they eventually bat tomorrow, whether that's at the start of play after the declaration or deeper into day 3. They're now going to be having to combat that scoreboard pressure that Australia have piled up.
Well, Rohit does look like he's carrying the world on his shoulders. He doesn't look right out there. He's he's a bit sluggish in the field. He looks unhappy, like maybe he's a bit unwell, something like that. He had the potential catch from Travis Head's leading edge that skewed into the cordon, and he dived across and couldn't get it, where maybe a more nimble fielder might have got there. And when he did take the catch off Smith, there was no Kohli celebration. He just tossed the ball away and looked like, oh, thank God we finally got a wicket, rather than let's try to pump up the team. So he does look very flat.
Quick word for Alex Carey, who that can go either way there too. I know the day is Australia's comprehensively, but 3 wickets in a hurry to the second new ball. When Head's dismissed at 6 for 327, there is a world where Australia are all out 350 odd. Well, instead they're 7 for 405 at stumps, a brisk 45, an enterprising 45. I love the cross-court forehand he played late in the day, charging a seamer, that kind of thing. He looks
slog sweep off Jadeja.
He really does look a more resilient operator this year. That time off served him well. He played nicely last week, albeit without necessarily the returns he probably deserved with that partnership with Travis Head. So, nod to Alex Carey. I hope he gets the chance to bat on tomorrow. And Jeff, as we make our way to the Final Word Hall of Fame, before we go to the break, as we should, CBUS Super are supporting this podcast, as they have since 2018.
Sort your super out. It's not hard. You want superannuation. You want an income when you retire. You want to make sure that it's steady, that it's reliable. You pick the fund with an 8.87% average return over the last 40 years.
Beautiful set of numbers.
Past performance, not a reliable indicator of future performance.
CBUSSuper.com.au.
That's it. That's all the information you need. Go there, find them, they'll tell you what to do.
And all the information about CBUS and Maurice Blackburn are in the show notes. All right, on the other side of the break, we'll be returning with the Final Word Hall of Fame.
It is the final word. It is the Australia-India Daily, and another Australia-India contest will be the 28th of December.
Wow.
Adam, the Pro Kabaddi League, they're bringing in professional Kabaddi players. They're making teams out of Australian rules footballers who've recently given up the gig. And they're both tackling sports, they're running sports, they're evasion sports. If you haven't watched Kabaddi, because I've been just mainlining the highlights over the last few days, you've got two sides of a court. It's like a netball court or something, like a handball court, maybe European style.
Oh, yeah.
Some sort of spongy-ish hard court, like a hard court that's not that hard, if that's not contradictory. And then you've got...
Not quite the rebound days.
You've got a team, it's probably a little more forgiving than when Federer's trying to, inspire Steve Smith.
What a disgrace they don't play the Australian Open on rebound days, by the way.
Don't they?
They play it on a hard court now.
Okay.
I didn't know that.
Aren't they the same thing?
Not quite.
Okay. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know what's different fundamentally, but I like the idea we had our own surface
in Melbourne. We had our own thing, rebound. Yeah. It was ace. It was an ace time. So, one player runs into the other court and has to tag everybody, which I like. It's very cute. Yeah. But it's tag in
British Bulldog.
In which you can get smashed into the ground. Well, British Bulldog, you've got to get through the lines without being tackled. Here, you've got to go in and tag and then not get tackled on your way out. So how many players can you tag before they tackle you? So they can't tackle you front on because you'll tag them. And then once you've tagged them, they're out of the game.
I see.
But you've got like 5 or 6 players circling you, trying to tackle you at the same time as you're trying to tag them. It's very cat and mouse. There's a lot of back and forth, and then the player, they're called the raiders. They raid. They're not the Canberra Raiders, but that's different, up the milk. But they come in and they raid and they tag, and then they've got to get back to the safety of their own lines. That's how it works. That's the Pro League. That's what we're going to be seeing on the 28th.
Well, good driver in heavy traffic was Liam Shields. I would trust him in that environment.
No, I banned you from talking
about
Liam Shields.
I'm going to keep talking about Liam Shields. What a player he was. That goal he kicked in the 2014 Grand Final got me very excited.
Well, he's in the Pro Kabaddi League.
He's in the team. And Campbell Brown is coaching. That's another thing that I know. And myriad other Aussie rules players that you'll know. So they'll kick off the basketball for the night. They'll kick off Bruce Bolden and Leonard Copeland and Luke Longley and whoever else is playing in the NBL these days.
I don't think Luke Longley's playing anymore.
No.
I think he's given the game away.
Parky, who played for the Southeast Magic.
What a disgrace that Luke Longley didn't get a gig in The Last Dance, by the way. He just wasn't in it, the documentary.
Oh, right.
The Bulls documentary. I mean, he was the centre. He was a key part of some of those campaigns.
Who would be the Aussie rules equivalent of Luke Longley, as every news article read for about a year when trying to draw a longbow between Michael Jordan's career and Aussie rules football, because we have to be so obsessed with American sport. Well, in this show, we care about Indian sport as well. Kabaddi on the 28th. We'll be there. You should come as well. Hall of Fame, our most final word moment of the day. Why don't you take it away? I'll come second.
I think Stephen Peter Devereux Smith, got to do the middle names because that's the law. Same with Brian Lara. If you leave out the Charles,
I think
you
only
get arrested.
You and I do SPD Smith.
Yeah? Okay.
I don't think many people do the Devereux thing anymore.
Yeah, well, back in the day we used to call him Spud. Remember, SPD Smith. But he kind of outgrew the Spud name by just being bloody good for years and years. Out for 101. Like I said, doesn't make a lot of small hundreds. He made the 100 even against South Africa at Centurion, was it, back in 2014?
Which for a long time was my favourite Steve Smith innings.
Oh, what an innings.
That was my top of the pile. I love the way that he explained the grip so well and how he was able to drive down the ground so fluently. That was the very start of this guy's ridiculous.
But this one, 101, and they're nicking off, and I think that he would have thought it's so difficult. It's been so difficult to get starts and get through the tough part, and then he wanted twice as many. So he comes off. And he's got the presence of mind, credit to him, bless him, to notice that everybody's cheering him, and he's annoed. He's coming off and he's annoyed, and he goes, "Oh, okay, I better wave to the crowd because they're all happy. I'm not happy, but they're happy." So he does a quick circle. It wasn't the one like the one from 2017 when he gave them the full big bat up, slow circle a couple of times.
Yeah.
He gave him a quick pirouette, and he waved, and then he came off, and then he immediately threw his helmet on the ground, and very clearly, I wasn't watching the screen. I could see this live from 60 metres away on the boundary. Went fuck.
Yeah,
and
I saw a very clear fuck's sake
Yeah.
in front of me where they're exiting the field. You're right, he was furious with himself but knew that he had to do the bit that you do when you've made the Test 100. By the way, that Brisbane 100 from 2017, that's the innings that Smith identified as his best ever at the time. That's where all the lightsabers started. And
8.5 hours.
And all the rest. Who was bombing him that day, Jeff? Here's your quiz question. Who was going around the wicket trying to bomb him?
Who was Jake Ball?
Jake Ball.
There we go.
Jake, very good from you.
I didn't even look at the scorecard for
Very, very good from you. Well done. Final
he
word.
only played about 2 tests, didn't he?
Well, good cricketer, Jake Ball. Final words, Hall of Fame stuff from me. Oh, here's one for you. You'll appreciate this. Tommy Morris, colleague of mine and listener to the show. He pulled this up on our SDN coverage today. If you measure it for bowlers with a minimum of 190 wickets, and I'll tell you why in a moment, Bumrah's got the lowest average ever at 19.8.
You don't need to tell me why. That's to carve out Sid Barnes.
Carve out Sid Barnes. Well done. So Sid Barnes at 16 and spit. and Bumrah, now he's gone beyond him. It's like the 6.996.
Okay.
That would often,
So what's Bumrah at the moment?
Bumrah's 19.8 or something like that. 17 at 11 in the series. 49 at 17 against us in Australia, and I mean all these numbers are absurd and reflects how special this guy is. The Siraj Bales bit with Labuschagne, I just loved everything about that. Not only Siraj going past Labuschagne, him not really knowing what was going on, Labuschagne almost putting his ear out to listen, then Siraj changing the bails next to him, then dropping one of the bails, then Labuschagne picking up the bail for him or gesturing to do it, and as soon as Siraj turned his back, Labuschagne changing them back to where they were originally. So a new variation on the bails trick, the Nathan Lyon, Stuart Broad bails trick.
How long after that did he get out?
No, Labuschagne did get out soon after that, but it was at the other end. It was to Reddy. So you could say Siraj played a hand in that, but he didn't get the wicket to his name. I've got one more here. Oh yes, Jay Shah in the press box today, the supremo of world cricket, doing his thing. No, I'm not going to name names, but some people were utterly fawning over Jay Shah in the presence of the boss. And there was some applause from, you know what, I don't want to get into this, I don't want to annoy anyone, but it was humorous to observe from about 10 metres away. I'm going to have one more from Siraj. So everybody noticed the thing where the towel came out of the waistband and Smith got annoyed. What I liked is that Richard Kettleborough then confiscated the towel. He went, no, you can't have that. I'm going to put that in my pocket. You can have it back when you need it.
Have it back at the end of the over.
At the end of, like a teacher at school. You can have it back at the end of the day. So I enjoyed the fact that symbolically, literally, Siraj had literally lost his rag.
Oh, and last one before we go, 34,227, a record-breaking crowd here at the Gabba today. I'm not quite sure where it lines up all time, but
record-breaking for India.
It's like the best crowd they've had here in X years, or whatever it is. It's a serious crowd here today, and that's to the credit of the Queensland public who have turned out in their droves across 2 days so far, and I'm sure they will tomorrow as well when this test continues.
The poor buggers who showed up yesterday who were streaming out of the ground all afternoon.
30,000 of them when they didn't see more than 13 overs played. That's it from us. On the way out, I'll just show you again that I've got the yesterday. Easy Westbury said to me last night or this morning. She listened to the pod but didn't watch it. She's like, your blue sunglasses, your wife approves of those blues? No, not these ones. Rach does not approve of these ones. These are the Larry ones you wear on the field. Yep. I'm not sure what they're called, but they're the bigger ones. They're pretty bloody good though.
They're the middle of the three. They're not the biggest.
They're not the biggest. They're not the flare ones that Maxie's wearing, but they're the next one in size. They're not the casual.
They're the mama bear of the three bears of the sunglasses.
But so the casual ones were the ones I was wearing yesterday. This is the second blue lot. T20vision.com/final word. You'll see the link in the show notes. Great Christmas gift, which many of our listeners have taken up already.
They have.
So you can do the same and get your discount, which I think is 10%. I'm pretty sure.
It's definitely 10%. I know it's 10%. And you can give that. You can say, here are some Glenn Maxwell sunglasses to someone you like.
Speaking of Glenn Maxwell, on the way out, our live show next Sunday, this time next week.
Yeah.
Ricky Ponting.
Hello.
With Glenn Maxwell at his book launch. So if you're going to be in Melbourne on the 22nd of December, and why wouldn't you be 3 days before Christmas, at the old Hi-Fi Bar, Max Watts, link to the tickets in the show notes, but as you always say, you can use the internet. You can find Final Word live show Melbourne, 22nd December, century.com.au/TFW24 to be precise. Come to our live show.
You're already on the internet.
Glenn Maxwell there, his book launch with Ricky Ponting, who we've never had on the pod before.
And Glenn Maxwell with his childhood idol. That's the cutest bit.
Yes.
So we're going to have Glenn asking questions of Ricky. It's going to be a lovely a love-in at the old Hi-Fi. It's smack bang in the middle of the city on Swanson Street. Bang. And you can roll out of there straight onto the tram and off you go. Merry Christmas. So come and join us. It'll be a great end of year do. That's it. This has been the Final Word Daily. Australia, India will be back tomorrow for day 3. Jeff Lemon, Adam Collins. We'll see you soon.
Night.